A riposte to a person looking for updates on Mr. Robinson, aka Yaxley-Lennon, Stephen Yaxley-Lennon. It appears we've become the place to go, the go-to place if you want information on Mr. Robinson. There was a recent article by the mainstream media, yes, the mainstream media. Now, it appears they took information from us. In this instance, it was either, if we recall correctly, Huffington Post or Vice Media. We may do a video on that topic, but let's focus on the task in hand, and that's JJViolator's comment. JJViolator asks, Stephen Yaxley-Lennon has been awfully quiet recently. What is happening in respect to the defamation trial where he spread malicious lies about the Syrian teenager? Well, JJViolator, the update is that he's dealing with a number of court cases simultaneously, one of which may well be his cousin's case, his cousin being Kevin Carroll. He may, and I stress the word may, he may have been involved in a road rage incident. We did cover this in the past video. You may want to avail yourself of that video.
Up to the stage to speak, Kev Carroll, who's currently on remand for threatening someone with a machete. Just if you didn't know that, Tommy Todd, Kev Carroll's currently on remand for threatening someone with a machete.
Mr. Goddard mentioned it, although a machete was not mentioned in the news article that we found. The article itself mentioned a sharp article, but like we say, we can't be sure whether that's Big Kev, Mr. Robinson's Big Kev, or some other plonker. As for updates on Mr. Robinson, he had the Barrow case recently, where he was ordered to hand in all of his footage and material from his so-called journalism in Barrow. Now, he's left poorly informed people to become quite conspiratorial, and I think he's done this deliberately. As ever, we've got the information and we can shed light on the decision by the courts, the Barrow courts, to haul him over to Barrow and force him to hand over his footage. We were the first ones to notice that in that lame dialogue with Mr. Sarah Garvey, he actually let slip. He made a real boo-boo. He stated that he does not believe Ellie Williams's claims regarding Asian grooming gangs in Barrow. He doesn't believe her, right? So the authorities clearly picked up on that fact, and they probably felt that this guy is so uncontrolled that he's going to end up influencing the trial negatively. Remember, the only person on trial here is Miss Williams for the perversion of the course of justice, and an aspect of that is falsifying evidence against folks. Hence why they've asked him to hand in all his footage, and he's probably under some sort of gagging order now, and he can't mention anything with regards to the folks that he's interviewed, because it appears he interviewed some of those people who may well be witnesses against Miss Williams. But of course, naturally, Mr. Robinson doesn't mention any of this to his followers, and he leaves his followers to become conspiratorial and think that there's some sort of massive cover-up. Again, that's Mr. Robinson's raison d'etre. That's what he's about. That's his modus operandi. That is exactly what Mr. Robinson is about. Misinformation, misdirection. The other updates, JJViolator, if you're interested, fella, it appears, well, it is thought, let's word it that way, it's thought that Mr. Robinson has been moving his assets in order to make it difficult for young Mr. Hijazi, the Syrian lad, and Mr. Stuckberry, the lefter, to receive substantial compensation from Mr. Robinson himself in the event that they win their respective cases against Mr. Robinson. So he's dealing with cases from the Syrian lad and Mr. Stuckberry. There was a preliminary hearing in March, which the BBC reported on, concerning the Syrian boy's case against Mr. Robinson. Now, that was merely to outline the definition and the specifics of the arguments that each side will be presenting or confined to during the hearing the proper hearing. That's going to be held perhaps in the next few months, but as you can imagine, it's been held up due to COVID, but we do expect it to take place in the next few months. There's no exact date as far as we're aware. If anybody knows, let us know. And in the affirmative, Mr. JJViolator, Mr. Robinson has been quiet. You're right. He's lost Zio's support from Ezra Levant, and now that Avi Yemeni has left his side, it looks like he's becoming more distant from the shady figures operating that marionette. Brian of London has not been enthusing about Mr. Robinson of late either. Back in the day, he'd regularly enthuse about him, but that was when Mr. Robinson had some semblance of relevance. Nowadays, he doesn't appear to be relevant at all. You have a look at Paul Golding's operation. They've stolen a march on him, haven't they? By invading the hotels and hopping over to Dover, doing patrols and what have you. They've stolen a march on him. You'd have thought that would have been Mr. Robinson's territory, but Mr. Robinson's probably lost hunger now. He's well fed. He's a millionaire. Or he's very wealthy at the very least, and he doesn't really need to do any of that to grift nowadays. He's made his money and he could sit back and retire as a wealthy man. But of course the Zios, they jump ship. They've left him on his own now, and I feel that the reason for this is they've recognized that there's little more that they could wring out from Robinson's cloth. So he's of little use to the bigger boys behind the scenes now, especially now that focus is being shifted more towards China. There's less need for them to hire the services of somebody to babble on about Muslims for the Zio agenda. So he's been left with the old boy, Alan Craig and Peter McIlvenney. They're using him now to promote some no-mark, so-called, and I repeat, so-called Christian organisation called Hearts of Oak, or Hearts of Woke as some people have styled it. Quite why a Christian organisation is relying on Mr. Robinson, a person who does not even believe in the Christian faith, to promote their organisation is, well, that's one for another day, so stay tuned.